Beruchim haboim, welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Zayin Amud Beis, 8 lines from the top from the 2 dots. The Gemara had just previously told us the dimensions of a Carmelis are Arba Tfachim by Arba Tfachim and a height of Asara Tfachim. The Gemara now brings back a statement in regards to the Carmelis. Says the Gemara Gufa, Amar Rav Gidol, Amar Rav Chia bar Yosef, Amar Rav, Bayis she'ein toichoi Asara, v'kruyoi mashlimoy la'asara. If you have a house that has only 9, let's say, tfachim high, the walls are only 9 tfachim, and the ceiling is an additional tefach, which is mashlim la'asara tfachim. Al gagoi muter l'taltel bekuloi. On top of the roof, it's a private domain, it's a reshus hayachid, and therefore he's able to then walk and metaltel on that roof. Betoichoi ein betaltelin boy ela bedalet amos. But inside of that area, he cannot even walk dalet amos because it is a Carmelis. Says the Gemara, Omra Abaye, v'im chokak boy dalet al dalet, v'hishlimo la'asara muter l'taltel bekuloi. Abaye says if he would dig an area of dalid al dalid tfachim, whereby then there's going to be asara tfachim between the ground after he dug it out and the roof and the ceiling. So he says then he will be able to then walk in the entire area as much as he would like to, be metaltal in that area, because it would have the din of a reshus hayachid. My taimo, what's the reason? Have chori reshus hayachid, because then it would be considered to be holes of a reshus hayachid. V'chori reshus hayachid ki reshus hayachid damu. And just like if you have holes on the walls of reshus hayachid, so those holes in the walls are also considered to be a reshus hayachid. So too over here. Since over here he would make dalid al dalid that would have asara tfachim, which is dimensions of reshus hayachid. So even outside the dalid al dalid, within the walls, is considered to be also a reshus hayachid, because this digging is considered to be charei reshus hayachid. What's the source for this? Says the Gemara, the Itmar. It says the following: charei reshus hayachid, reshus hayachid damoy. That the holes of a reshus hayachid, in the walls of reshus hayachid, if you have holes or cracks in that wall, those cracks or those holes have the din of reshus hayachid. Chari reshus harabim. On the other hand, if you have a wall that is adjacent to a reshus harabim, so there's a machlokes what we say about those holes in the walls of the adjacent wall to the reshus harabim. Abai omer ki reshus harabim damo. Rava omer lav ki reshus harabim damo. Abai maintains that it is like the reshus harabim. But Rava argues and says, no, it loses its status as Reshus HaRabim, and therefore it has a different status. If it's Dalid Tfachim, then it'll be Reshus HaYachid. If it's less than Dalid Tfachim, then it'll be a Carmelis. Says the Gemara, or rather a Makam Petur, says the Gemara, Omar le Rava le'Abaye. Lididoch, according to you, the Amris Chari Reshus Harabim ki Reshus Harabim Damo. Rava says to Abai, you who say that Reshus Harabim, the Charim of the Reshus Harabim of that adjacent wall, the holes or the cracks, has the same din as the Reshus Harabim. If that's so, he asks, Mai Shna Meho, what is the difference from this that we said, the Chi'asr of Dimiyam Rabbi Yochanan, Lo Nitzurcha El Lekaren Zavis Hasmuch LeReshus HaRabim. What is the difference between this and that which was told to us on Amud Aleph, describing the dimensions of a not just the dimensions, but the Reshus of a Carmelis? That we said that even though you have an area that is in the middle of the plaza of the city, which is considered to be a Reshus HaRabim, but if you have if you have, let's say, houses we described that are adjacent to this Rishus Harabim, or let's say it's a thoroughfare rather, not the plaza, but a thoroughfare where there are houses that are lined up against the Rishus Harabim, and you have one house that is jutted in, let's say, like we said, like a triangle, and therefore there's corners on either sides. So we said, even though it's true that people, when there's a lot of traffic, will then walk in those jutted areas because there's no space to walk or to stand in for that matter, but nonetheless it loses its status as Rishus Harabim and is considered to be a Carmelis instead. So asks Rava the following question: let this be like Charim of Rishus Harabim, and therefore let it have the status of a Rishus Harabim. Not like you're saying before, it was said before that it's a Carmelis. The Gemara answers, Abai answers, Hasam lo neicho tashmishtei. Hacha neicha tashmishtei. The difference is that over there, it was not noyach, it was not convenient to then be using that area. Only if a person was stuck because he couldn't walk or stand anywhere, so you go to that area, which is the corners of the Rishus Harabim. But these holes or these cracks are convenient for the people who are walking in Rishus Harabim. If they want to place something, a small object, to put it in that crack or in that hole, and then leave it there temporarily until they come back for it later, that's convenient usage. And therefore, that's why it has the status of Rishus Harabim. Tnan, the Gemara tries to ask further. It says in the Mishnah, Hazarek daled amois bekoisel. We saw this Mishnah earlier on the Amud. It says a person who throws daled amois, hitting the koisel with this object that he's throwing. Lamala ma'asara kizorek ba'avir. If he hits the wall that is higher than 10 tefachim, then it's considered to be as if he threw it in the avir. Lamata me'asar tefachim kizorek ba'aretz. But if he throws it within asar tefachim of the wall, then it's considered to be on the ground, meaning that it's nach, it lands on the ground, and therefore it's as if he threw in the Rishus Harabim from the Dalet Amos that he was throwing. Now the Gemara wants to then understand this Mishnah better, which is really the explanation we had already given in the previous Shir, as follows. My kizorek ba'aretz. The Gemara works out, what does it mean that you're zorek on the ground? When you throw this object and it hits the wall within asar tefachim, the Mishnah says as if he was zorek ba'aretz. What does that mean that you were zorek on the aretz? It hit the wall. Not only that, says the Gemara, v'hol loy nach, it didn't stay on the wall. And therefore, how can it be considered to be then making a hoitzah of Dalet Amos in the Rishus Harabim? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan, b'dveila shmeina shanu. We're talking about a case where he threw a juicy fig, and therefore it was a plump fig. When he threw it, the fig then stuck against the wall. Therefore it was nach. And if you want to suggest that indeed, according to you, Abaye, that the holes of the Rishus Harabim have the din of a Rishus Harabim, then lama li lu'ukma b'dvei l'shmeina. Why do we have to make the case as being somebody threw one of these plump figs and it's stuck on the wall? Lukma b'tzror v'chayfetz v'denach bechor. Say that we're talking about a case where he threw a small stone, a pebble, or a small object, and it went into the hole of this wall. That would be a more likely case. Zimnim meshani lo. Sometimes Abai answered this way, the following: Shaini tzror v'chayfetz de mahader v'asi. Tzror, a pebble, and an object is different because when it hits the wall, it will bounce back. And therefore, the Mishnah couldn't explain it in that way. Zimnin meshani lo b'koisel de les bechor. And sometimes Abai would answer that we're talking about a case where the wall did not have a hole in it, and therefore there's no kasha in Abaye. We can still say Chari Rishus Harabim is Rishus Harabim. Mimai, says the Gemara, asked the Gemara, Mimai midiktani reisha zorak lemala. How do you know that indeed it doesn't have a chor? Let's prove it from the Mishnah itself. Midiktani reisha Zorek lamala masar tfachim kezorek ba'avir, from the fact that the Reisha teaches when you throw an object that is higher than asar tfachim, it's considered to be in the avir. V'isal kedaita bekoisil the isbechor. But if you want to suggest that we're talking about where the wall does have a chor, it does have a hole in it, then amai kezorek ba'avir. Honach bechor. Why say in the Reisha that it's as if it was zorek ba'avir? Because it's a reshus harabim, and higher than asar tfachim is not considered to be reshus harabim. So it's as if you threw it in the air. Why do you have to say that? Honach bechor. It went into a chor, and if it went into a hole in the wall that was higher than asar tfachim, then it would be considered to be now in the reshus hayachid, whereby he did a hotzah from reshus harabim, and is machnis into the reshus hayachid by throwing the object into the hole in the wall higher than asar tfachim, and now being a reshus hayachid. V'chitema, if you'll say masnisin the less bilhu, and by the way, and therefore, if that was not the case in the Reisha, then it can't be the case in the Seifa, because you have to be consistent. If the Reisha is not talking about a chor, then the Seifa also cannot be talking about a chor. V'chitema masnisin the less bilhu dalid al dalid, and if you want to say that the Mishnah is not talking about dalid al dalid, and therefore would not be a private domain of a reshus hayachid, because a reshus hayachid is defined as dalid al dalid, and it can go up as high as the rakia. But if it's not dalid al dalid, you'll suggest v'omer Rav Yehuda Rav Chia zark lamalo me'asar tfachim v'holcha v'nocha bechor kol shehu. That we're talking about. Rav Chia says if a person were to throw up an object higher than asar tfachim and it lands in a chor, a small hole, bonu l'machlokes Rabbi Meir Rabbanan. That's the machlokes between Rabbi Meir and the Rabbanan. The Rabbi Meir Sovar choykigin lahashlim. Rabbi Meir says you do make that chor, even though it's a small chor, you are mashlim it to make it the dimensions of dalid al dalid to make it considered to be a reshus hayachid. V'Rabbanan savre ein choykigin lahashlim, and the Rabbanan said you don't choykigin lahashlim. Elolav shmamina b'koisel the less bechor shmamina. Must be that this wall that we're talking about is not talking about a wall that had a hole in it. In other words, since Rabbi Meir is the Stam Mishnah, and over here he's of the opinion, we see that if there is a hole, he enlarges the hole to be the dimension that's necessary. So therefore, even though there's a small hole, if there would be indeed a small hole, then it would have to be considered to be a reshus hayachid, because then he would enlarge it to be dalid al dalid. Elamai, we see from here that since the Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, that the Mishnah is not talking about where there's a hole in the wall.